your profile is like when I was reading about you, man. Here I'll tell you what I saw. Flow under fire, stuntman, and performance expert aligning the facts. And this is what caught me was focus, arousal, confidence, and tenacity. Man, that's I used to do police work. I got to do SWAT. I got to do all these cool things. Um, and as a kid, I was a Lee Majors fan. And when I kept reading, I was like, all right, I got to figure out how to make this work. And then we've been trying to get our schedules together, man. So I just wanted to meet you, learn more about the facts, um, and aligning the facts and just how you deploy that. But I'm curious. Let me tell everyone about you real quick, Brian. Um, let's see here. I had to, Brian Hite, PhD, known as the high stakes performance whisperer, with over 30 years of experience as a professional stuntman, hence the fall guy when I was a kid. Dr. Hite combines his extensive background with advanced expertise in performance psychology to help individuals excel under pressure. His unique approach offers valuable insights into mastering high stakes situations. And man, I've lived in that high stakes type environment many years ago, and now I take this into my teenagers' athletic fields, right? So same breath work, same mentality as if I'm teaching a SWAT operator, and now I deploy on the little league field. But I just wanted to thank you so much for giving me some time today to learn more about you, brother.
Yeah, and well, I appreciate you having me, and I love that you've made the connections that you have. I mean, the when I talk about high stakes, sometimes people go straight to where you've been and where I've been, which is
Yeah.
physical high stakes situations where our health and well-being, even lives, sometimes are at risk. But that isn't all that high stakes is. In fact, the way I define it is high stakes environments are any environments that we care about,
Yeah.
any situation that matters to us, any situation where the consequences are important. That's a high stakes environment. And that's why we're able to generalize from stunts to police work to the athletic field. Because at the end of the day, what we're talking about are people in situations that they really care about, that really matter, where the consequences are important and valuable and meaningful.
Yeah. A little bit it's stressful, right? Is when you take approaches as a kid, and when I'm coaching, I'll do this tonight. I'll ask all of them like, "Hey, what are you gonna do when you get to the plate?" And they're like, "I'm gonna hit the ball, coach." I'm like, "What's your biggest fear?" And they're like, "Striking out." And I'm like, well, "What about hitting the ball? What are you going? What's your biggest fear should be? What are you gonna do after you hit the ball? I need you. That should be where we should be thinking versus the negative that comes along with that." Um, Dude, walk me back. Like, what does a day in your life look like now, Doc?
Mm. Well, before we get there, let me just, because that's an interesting point you brought up in a
Thank you.
specific situation that you're talking about. And you let it off with it's stressful situation. My argument is that I don't think they are, or at least they
Yeah.
don't have to be. The case that I make is that stress and pressure are not inevitable. They aren't tied to situations. There are no situations that we'll find ourselves in that are by definition situations that will create stress and pressure in people, and certainly not in people to the same degree. For example, you were a police officer for a long time and you did the SWAT work. You said, I've never done that. And I mean, I've had people shoot blanks at me a lot of times, never had anybody
Right.
shoot real bullets.
That's right.
So put into a situation like that, you're going to experience that moment very differently than I would. Similarly, I've been hit by a car a dozen times. I'll do it again. You've probably never been hit by a car, at least not on purpose.
Not,
And
not
it's a
on purpose.
different
Yeah.
feeling
Yeah.
standing
I've,
in front of a
I've,
vehicle. So, so
I've been hit a couple times when I when I didn't move quite fast enough or what have you, but definitely not intentional like
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah. So it's just, for that situation, I will experience that differently than you will. So, and in those moments, and this isn't even new information. This goes back at least 2,000 years. There were Stoic philosophers who wrote about this. Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus wrote, it's not the events that disturb us. It's how we think about those events that disturbs us. So the situations themselves are just situations. Some people might experience pressure, some people might not. Some people might experience stress, some might not. And those are two different things. And I'll go through that later on, because I think that's an important distinction. But at the end of the day, what we're talking about are situations, and we aren't required to experience stress and pressure in them. And I argue that it's not helpful when we do, that at all times, stress and pressure are unhelpful and counterproductive. I get pushed back on that sometimes too. But in terms of the baseball situations you were talking about, I think that's a great example because, you ask the kids, where should your focus be? And they're thinking about, I need to hit the ball. I would say, no, you don't. What you need to think about is, what's your stance? What's your arousal level, your activation level? Are you loosened up? Where's your mind? Where's your attention? Is it on the pitcher? Is it on the second baseman? Like, where are you putting your attention? Or do you believe in your ability? Like, this is the stuff where, if we focus on what we want, the outcome, then we're not paying attention to the things that we need to do in order to create conditions for that outcome to occur. And that's where pressure often lives. So, people will go up, if I don't hit the ball, I'm going to strike out. Everybody's going to think I'm horrible. My parents are going to yell at me. I'm going to let the team down. If that's where my mind goes, I'm going to experience pressure because my focus is on the consequences.
Yeah.
Similarly, if I get up there and I hit a home run and it's ninth inning and I'm able to take us out of the game and I'm going to be the hero and everybody's going to love me and it's going to be the greatest moment ever. That creates pressure too. So when our attention is in the future on the potential consequences, we experience pressure. Stress is a little bit different. Stress is about the situation itself. It's about stepping into the box and perceiving that situation as a threat or not. If we perceive it as a threat, then we're likely to experience some stress. If we don't perceive it as a threat, if we perceive it as an opportunity or a challenge, we don't experience stress. We experience excitement. It's a whole different feeling. We experience joy. We lean into that moment. We want more of that moment. And if we do experience the situation as a threat and we don't believe we have the resources necessary to deal with that threat, that is also the place where stress lives. So if I don't think that I have, I don't know, whoever this pitcher is, he throws a mean curveball and I don't hit curveballs very well, I go in thinking I don't have the resources necessary to deal with this situation well. And I perceive the situation as a threat because if I don't do well in it, to me, I think I'm going to be harmed. Not harmed physically. Nobody's going to hit me over the head with a bat, hopefully, but harmed socially in the sense that maybe I've let people down, or people are going to look at me differently. I'm going to be judged differently. So that's where stress lives, is about that perception in the moment. And I think it's really important with the police stuff and with the stunt stuff. I want to make this point really clear too. When we talk about whether we're going to perceive a situation as a threat, sometimes there's no way around just saying it's a threat. Because, at the end of the day, if you're facing a situation where somebody's pointing a weapon at you, that's a threat. If you're facing the last job that I did, I was, about 10 feet up and I was supposed to fall, bounce off the picnic table, go to the ground, no pads. That's a threat. There's potential for harm. I can't ignore that. There's no way to gloss it over and, with rainbows and unicorns. That's a threat. But I've always believed that I had the resources necessary to deal with those situations. And so I don't encounter stress. I don't feel stress in those moments. I don't know if you did or not. And maybe even looking back now, I'd be interested to know, like, conceptualizing it in that way, there may have been some situations you were in where you felt that excitement. That's why I've worked with the Army for a decade. I worked with Rangers. I worked with Special Forces. I worked with 160th. I worked with all the people, tip of the spear guys. And every one of them, this is fun. I do it because I love it, and that's where they live. Yes, it's a threat, but they believe they have the resources necessary to deal with it. Now, when they don't think that they have the resources necessary, that's where stress starts to come in. So I don't know if
spot on that. You're spot on. We plan, we pre-plan, we train. You got good with your stuff. You got to work around the same group. There wasn't a lot of unfamiliar faces, and if they were, we put them in places. Like if we had helpers coming in for whatever, we put them in roles where they were not going to kind of mess up our dynamics type thing. So we kept our comfort levels it helped us keep our, in SWAT sometimes, you go, we don't overcomplicate it. You go right, I'll go left. You go, yeah, just follow, just keep doing that and you will be fine, is an old concept that we used to teach. So the getting everybody kind of spun up, but comfort in your team, and then comfort in your training. So we shot a lot, all those things, and then I always the more I got around other groups, just the pre planning and the time that we would put into just making sure. Just having eyes on maybe a location or whatever that we were getting ready to go to, where we were really spun up, to where you knew the entrance, you knew that this, you knew all the things, and even back then we were planning, there's worst case scenarios, best case, it was, the mission was going to be completed, but you still work through those phases of kind of a best worst case scenarios and let everything evolve.
Yeah, well,
Fortunately for us,
from a contingency planning standpoint, and I think that's an
yeah,
important thing, because some people will get into situations and those worst case scenarios come up. Well, if I screw this up, then this is the bad thing that's going to happen, and then it's full stop, and that's it. That's as far as they get. Not if this bad thing comes up, then I will. That's the contingency planning. That's productive. It's funny.
you would go into, like, our mitigation might be, we were planning for three and we found five. We were planning for three and we found five, and two of those were kids, right? So there's other factors that would just kind of get molded into the clay that we were able to adapt and move through it, because we were planning for all the key things. So there's little unknowns that you're like, oh, we didn't really plan for this. They were okay. They fell right into place with where they should. And it didn't increase our risk factors much because we were so prepared on the other side.
Yeah. And you mentioned the facts at the beginning. One of those, the C, is confidence. And that's really, you said comfort in your team. I would say that the team, you're confident in the team. You're confident in the sense that you believe that everybody is capable of doing what they're supposed to do successfully and effectively. You talked about training and preparation. That goes into confidence. The more we train, the more we prepare, the more we're able to encounter different things. And I mean, this is one of the sources of confidence. There are three others, but that's a place where confidence lives. And the more we can be comfortable with that training and preparation, the better. And comfortable with, like you just said, the unknown, because the thing that I've also seen people do is get very, very caught up in the planning and training and the sense that they have to know everything. And this is one of the things we talked about, threats. Sometimes the biggest threat is not even a thing. Yeah. It's the unknown. It's the uncertainty. We as human beings don't handle uncertainty well. We just don't. Ambiguity is not something we do well with. And so when we're in situations where it truly is just, it's not possible to know exactly what's going to happen. And therefore, it's not possible for me to know whether I have the necessary resources to deal with it, or at least with that particular situation. It's hard for me to be confident in my resources to handle something when I don't even know what the something is. No. So that unknown, that uncertainty can cause a lot of problems. So then we have to start redefining, well, what do we mean by resources? And this is the part where experience really comes in, because the more you can lean on the fact that, you know what, I don't know what is like all the specifics of what's going to happen, but I got a pretty good idea of about what's going to happen. And I've handled that before. I've handled both those situations and the unknown and uncertainty and unexpectedness that comes in any environment like that. I mean, truly, I don't know. There is no stunt that I've ever done that has gone exactly the way it was supposed to go. I mean, with no, same. At the time it was supposed to be, the way we'd rehearsed it. I mean, sometimes rehearsals will happen for a month or two, and then you get on set the day of, and something, I don't know, the location changed, or somebody didn't build something they were supposed to, or truly, this is not even a joke. Sometimes entire fights have been choreographed with doubles on the side with right-handed people, and you get there and you find out the actor is left-handed. Or has some kind of injury and can't use it, so everything changes. Yeah. Or you get there, the director's like, nah, I don't want to do that. Or you get to the time of the day and they're like, okay, I know we said we were going to do this, but we don't have time anymore, so we need to cut this down. What are we going to change? How are we going to fix it? So nothing goes perfectly, but what can happen is that we can lean on that experience, those past times when we've had to deal with those situations, and we've dealt with them effectively. That's a resource. Our memory, I don't know how else you call it, like just our memories can be a resource. Those past experiences that we have faced, and I don't want to say overcome, because that's probably too dramatic. It's just, we faced and we handled it. And here comes another one. Probably gonna be able to face that and handle it too. And I can lean on that confidence in myself in those moments. So that's why confidence is part of the facts. It is critical to our ability to, as much as possible, handle specifics, but even more than that, particularly when we're talking about stress, be able to deal with that really strong, pervasive, ubiquitous threat of uncertainty, unknown, because it's always there.
I think to touch on a couple things is what you would find yourself in as an operator. Sometimes inexperienced leaders would lead into the um, creating the what if, and we would what if things to death versus kind of getting to the point of where, all right, we kind of we got good masking tape. We don't just have, we know the edges aren't wet and pulling off. Like, we got some really good masking tape up on our plan, and it's just we need to go to an execution phase and
Yeah.
just let it evolve. Right?
Let
We're
it
not
happen.
doing anything dangerous. We're not going to be unsafe. All the things that we do, we can what if this to death and outplay. And I think sometimes I remember running into that a couple times to where just some leaders that I felt like as a young guy, looking back on it, that if I worked for both, I had inexperienced and I had very experienced, and I had in the middle, and the inexperienced folks would always lean into just what ifing it till they would, like, they're almost trying to talk you out of night. Let's say, all right, it seems like we
Yeah.
can't have this perfect, so let's don't go at all.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
that's what I'm saying is with that inexperience comes what's happening is they're trying to fill that hole with those what ifs. They're trying to eliminate as much unknown and uncertainty as possible. And it's like trying to fill a pitcher with a hole in the bottom of it. You can keep pouring all you want, but you're never going to get to the top, because you're never going to be able to get all the information. You're never going to you don't have a crystal ball. You can't tell the future. You don't know exactly what's going on. I'll tell you, one of the coolest conversations I ever got to have was with it was a command sergeant major for an infantry battalion when I was working at Fort Lewis. And we were talking about clearing rooms, because I was working a lot with units on clearing buildings. This was back in 2007 to 2009, when, it was at the heart of the war. It didn't matter what part of the Army you were in, you were going to be clearing buildings. If you were your support, you're still going to clear some buildings. So everybody was clearing buildings. And so I was trying to learn as much about it as I could. And I went in and I said, all right, Sergeant Major, what can you tell me about this room clearing thing? And he said, yeah, here's this manual. Read about it. Battle Drill 6, enter and clear room. So I sat down and I read the thing, and I'd been in enough shoot houses at that point I wasn't unfamiliar with clearing a room. And I read this manual and he came back in office. I said, Sergeant Major, this doesn't even make any sense. This isn't what you guys do at all. He said, no, he took the thing, threw it on the desk. He's like, no, this is crap. We had to figure out our own stuff. Come here, let me tell you how it goes. And then we went to a whiteboard and he drew, he's like, all right, here's a center fed room. Here's a corner fed room. Here's a small room. Here's how we stack. Here's how we go. And he took me through all the stuff. And in the process of that, he told me a story about how he was in Panama or Grenada, somewhere, wherever they went in the 80s. He was a Ranger too. He was special operations. And they went to go bust in this one thing that they thought they had all the intel on. And they went in the door, and he ran smack into a bunk bed. Went bam, and hit the ground. And then everybody else coming in behind him, and it's dark, and they're tripping over him. So now they got a pile of soldiers in the door with a bunk bed on there. And you just figure it out. Nobody can know that. You can't. It's situations like that. You could plan for hours. One of my favorite quotes is from Eisenhower during World War II. He said, planning. What does he say? Plans are useless, but planning is essential, or something like that. So going through the process of planning, training our minds to think through some of these scenarios and the different possibilities is a useful task. But at the end of the day, the plans, they don't survive because there's an enemy. Somebody else gets a vote. And
Yeah.
that's life too. That's your baseball tonight. The batter can walk into that box with the best plan in the world. All right, this pitcher's stats, I know them by heart. I can tell them all to you. He throws 2 fastballs for every curveball, and he tends to do this on this count. You could go in with all the knowledge and the best plan, and that pitcher could do something different. Why? Or they could just pull him out, and you don't even get that pitcher anymore because whatever, he hurt himself. Now somebody else is in there. You don't know, and so
No.
that uncertainty, that unknown, is something we have to start becoming comfortable with. It's not about blowing stuff off and not planning, not preparing, not training, and just kind of throwing everything to the wind of, I don't know, we'll see what happens. That's not it. But it's also not, I have to know all the things before I can feel comfortable and confident in my ability to execute. It's not that either.
Yeah, no, that's and we do that as adults through repetition. You talked about, and something I had heard before, and in speaking, I was in a speakers event, and Jill Bunny had brought it up, and she's like, "How's everybody feel?" And everybody's like, "She's like, are you nervous?" And everybody's like, "Yeah, you got money." So she went through all the emotional stuff, right? Your hands, and are you nervous? Are you feel, how's the butterflies and this? And she goes, "Listen." She goes, "That's all excitement, y'all, because you're getting ready to get to go do what you absolutely enjoy." And I hadn't heard it framed like that. And if I had, it didn't speak to me, but it did then. And I really reuse that a lot of times now. I'm like, you have busted. I tell it to the kids. I'm like, you busted your butt to go up there in front of all your friends and your parents, and to you should be excited, but it's not nervousness. Don't discount all your hard work. And tonight you get to compete in front of everyone and have this. You should be having this amazing amount of fun. So I really started approaching, even personally, when I'm getting ready to go do something or whatever, and I'm like, oh gosh, here it is, I'm getting ready to go out, or they're announcing, or what have you, and I'm like, all right, and then I'll just kind of pause at that moment and be like, all right, man, you asked for this so many times, and tonight you get to go do what you love. So bring your house down, all right? Just kind of positive self-talk on that. But
well, it's interesting because that's an important point. Now you're getting into the A part of facts,
yes,
arousal. And so the thing about that is, and the way connecting it to stress and pressure, this is where some of the confusion comes with what I said I got pushback with before. Like I need stress, I need pressure. That's how I do better. That's when I'm at my best. I need those things to perform. And the answer to that is it's mixed. So can stress and pressure facilitate performance, make it better? Yes, they can, but not directly. The way that happens is through arousal. So what happens is we see a situation as a threat. We don't think we necessarily have the resources to handle it. We start to experience stress. When we experience stress, the sympathetic nervous system activates. And when the sympathetic nervous system activates, the heart rate starts to increase, breathing rates change, they get faster, we start to sweat. There are a lot of different physiological changes that go along with sympathetic nervous system activation. And that sympathetic nervous system activation contributes to our energy activation levels, our level of pumped upness, our level of energy activeness. And that is directly tied to performance. So any given performance, any given task has a right amount of energy activation for it. For us personally, it's not the event itself that has this objective right amount of energy activation that's required to do it well. You and I we could be facing the exact same task and need very different levels of energy activation to do that task well. But there is a right amount of energy activation for us personally. Is stress a way that we can activate arousal levels or amp up arousal levels to the point where we can perform well? Yes, it is. Is it the best way? I would argue no, because you're still dealing with anxiety. There are a lot of avoidance emotions that accompany that. So if we experience stress and we perform well, we're performing well in spite of stress. Same thing with pressure. If I'm going into a situation feeling pressure, meaning I have to do this well because, whatever that because is, because I want to avoid this really bad thing, or I want to get this really good thing. Doesn't matter what it is. But if I'm going in thinking I have to do this well because I'm now going to experience pressure. With pressure comes sympathetic nervous system activation. With the sympathetic nervous system activation comes that energy boost. And that energy boost can, in a lot of situations, be very helpful for us. Now, we need to manage it. Sometimes it can be too high, too low. That's for us to figure out and to manage. But that arousal, that's where I think there's some confusion. People will be in these situations. They'll experience stress, they'll experience pressure, and then they think that, and then they do well, and they think that it's the stress and pressure, when in reality what happened was that arousal level changed. Now here's another point that goes to what you were talking about too, and I think that for me this was surprising when I figured it out as well, or when I first read about it. If we were to hook up whatever measures physiologically to you, if we were to hook up a heart rate thing, look at your breathing, look at your skin conductance, measure pupil dilation, if we were to do all of that, we wouldn't be able to tell whether changes in those things were the result of excitement or fear, whether, intense joy or anger. We wouldn't be able to know, because each of those emotions is connected. Physiologically, they look the same. So it really does come down to how we interpret those physiological changes when they happen. And this is tied to confidence. So I said there were more than one source of confidence. One source is personal experience. Well, another source of confidence is how we interpret those physiological changes when they happen. If we interpret those physiological changes as, well, of course my heart's beating faster, my breathing's changing, and my muscle tensions, of course all that's happening. My body's preparing me for action. This is what happens. This is what bodies do. When you get into a situation that matters, it's important, that you're looking forward to, that you're excited about, this is how the body reacts. So yeah, this is what I'm feeling. It's normal, it's natural, it's predictable, and I'm glad it's happening because it's going to be helpful. That's a way to interpret those. Another is, well, if I was really ready to do this, I wouldn't be feeling this way. I would be calm. If I was really ready to go and I was really capable of being good, I wouldn't be feeling what I'm feeling in my body right now. So I must not be ready to do what I'm about to do. So it affects confidence in that way. So we can boost our confidence in terms of how we interpret what you just said. The physiological changes are going to happen. It shouldn't surprise anybody ever that you get into a situation that matters to you and you experience those physiological changes. That's the body doing what bodies do. Yeah. It's going to happen. It should never shock anybody. It then just comes down to, okay, so what do I do with that information? How do I explain these physiological changes? Am I going to explain it in terms of excitement or fear? It's up to me. I get to pick.
How do you, we got to get to the F&T. We jumped around there for your facts, but what is kind of your concept on helping folks overcome that? Is there any things that you help people deploy along with your facts acronym?
Well, it goes along with the facts acronym. Yeah, because all those things are connected. They're not, again, we're human beings. We're complex. We are complicated creatures. And to try to focus on just one thing and say, if I just fix this one thing, then everything will be great. It's too naive. That's too simplistic. There's everything works together: physical, mental, emotional, social. One affects the other. If I'm having a great time with my friends and my relationships are strong, then, my physiology tends to be calmer. My mental state tends to be better. Similarly, after I work out, after I get a good solid exercise in, physiologically, neurotransmitter levels have changed. My body is now different, but my emotions are different too. I feel differently. I'm more able to interact with people. I'm more patient. Same thing after sleep. If I haven't slept or eaten, patience levels tend to go down. Grumpiness happens. Emotional regulation tends to be worse. All these things are connected. And in the same way, so are the facts. Focus, arousal, confidence, tenacity. They all go together. When I'm paying attention, focus, just to quickly go through that, focus is just where my attention is and how I'm attending. So if my attention is in the present moment on task relevant things, be they inside my body or outside my body, but present moment, task relevant things, then that's where my attention belongs. If my attention, on the other hand, like we were talking about before, on potential consequences that might happen, well, now that's the wrong place, because, like we talked about before, I might want this particular outcome, and I might actually be very right about the consequence associated with that outcome. I might not be right because it's in the future and we're very bad at predicting the future, But let's just say that the consequence that I believe is going to follow whatever result I have in my head is actually 100% accurate. And so I either want it or I don't want it, but I want a particular outcome. I can't put my attention on that outcome, hitting the baseball. I can't do that. I have to put my attention on, well, what is necessary physically, mentally, emotionally, and even socially to create conditions for me to hit the baseball, to achieve the outcome that I want. Those are the task relevant present moment things that I'm talking about. So if our attention is there, then our focus is where it needs to be. Arousal, we've talked about before. That's just being aware of, how pumped up do we need to be for us personally to be at our best in whatever environment we're in. Confidence, we've talked about as well. That's just simply the belief in our ability to be effective and successful in any given situation. And that can be situation specific, or it could be general. It could be when I step into the box to hit a baseball, I'm very confident. If you put me on the pitcher's mound to throw the baseball, somebody else, I'm not confident at all. Or it could be more general in the sense that, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm usually pretty good at handling whatever it is that comes up, whether it's in my social life or my work life or on the sports field. I don't know, stuff comes up. I feel like I'm confident. I feel like I can handle pretty much anything that comes to me, a more general confidence. But both are really important, and it's important to understand the sources of that confidence so that we can utilize all four to get us the confidence levels that are really helpful in terms of mitigating pressure when we happen to find ourselves in those situations, as well as stress. And then tenacity is just the stick to itness, the grit, the idea that this moment right now, this one performance situation is not everything. It's just not. Life's going to go on after it, probably. Again, there are some situations when that's just not the case, where if you screw it up, life actually literally doesn't go on. But most of the time, we're in situations where something's going to be next. And if I don't get it exactly right this time, I'll get it right next time. I know that I'm confident in my ability to come back from things. I know that I'm resilient. I know that I'm capable of learning and moving forward. So this one's not that big a deal. I'm going to take some of that. I'm going to take some of that weight off of me because I know that there's more, and I'm going to pursue it as long as it takes. So that's the tenacity part. That's that idea about, what is driving us in the first place, and how can we turn our perspective in a way that lets us realize that this is just one step along the path. This is one piece of the much longer puzzle, or bigger, whatever metaphor you want to put in there. But so that's tenacity.
And we take for granted, you and I both have worked in life or death, and that's a big deal. And I tell people that, and I'm like, listen, you work in life or death, your water tastes a little bit different on how you approach things, to the point where I worked in it probably too long, that when I went into the private sector post law enforcement, I couldn't treat everything as life or death, and it freed up as time went on. It freed up my ability as an adult to remember that it's okay for me to still make mistakes. And it's okay to have these moments. And I guess what was in my head, because we kind of wrapped around baseball a little bit, was like, we always hear about that winning home run in the World Series. Or we always hear about the win, but we never really talk about the losing pitcher. There's always that person who's made that mistake. He should have threw that pitch. If he had to do it again, I wish I'd have threw the slider. Or we hear about the winning pitcher. Rarely do we hear about the guy who struck out that lost the World Series for his team. There's always a loser that's in a lot of our scenarios that are non-life or death. So just using athletics as that model. So our ability to just kind of recognize that and just give ourselves some grace and keep learning and making mistakes and keep moving through life and our and processing that is that's some of the things that I approach into with kids at a very young age. But I also had to relearn that in my 30s as an adult. That's, hey, it's okay to keep learning, Jeff. It's all right. You fell short. It's all right. It's okay. It's not life or death. Keep moving forward. And like to your tenacity, part of your facts.
Yeah, it's interesting too. Even in the life or death situations, not everything about that situation is life or death. In other words, there are some mistakes that we can make where truly us or somebody else is going to pay a big price. But then there are other mistakes where it's like, like I said, like the soldier going to the building and crashing into a bunk bed. Well, I mean, that's what happens. And he was telling me the story about it. So clearly he didn't die because he crashed into a bunk bed. So not every mistake. In fact, I would argue if we really sit down and be honest with ourselves, even in those situations that are most dangerous, most risky, however we define that, whether it's physical risk like you and I have experienced, whether it's emotional risk, maybe somebody who's just been hurt a lot and the conversation that they want to have with a friend or a spouse is just, it's incredibly risky for them and, in terms of their perception. However we define risky, if we think about those moments, chances are, even when we've been in those moments that are the riskiest, we've still screwed up and we're still here. And people around us have screwed up too, and they're still here. And so although it is, sometimes much more, the consequences are just higher in some situations than others, how we approach performance should not be different. This is something that, as a coach, I mean, you've probably experienced this. To me, I think it does kids a disservice when we talk about, I don't know, regular season game is all right. Well, we've got this game, but then we get into some big tournament. We've made it to the end of the finals or whatever. Oh, it's a big game. This is the biggest game you're ever going to have. This is going to change your life forever. However it is that we're amping it up. If we make any difference between the second game and the first game, if we truly want these people to perform to their potential, and this is anything. I mean, this is anything. This is at the office. If you gave a presentation at a meeting versus you're giving a presentation to all the board and stakeholders in the whole company. It's same presentation, two different environments. One has higher consequences than the other. But at the end of the day, if you want to perform your best, and if we're coaches and we want these kids to perform their best, what we need to direct their attention to, the facts, doesn't change. They need to, in order for us to be our best in the meeting room, we do the exact same things we would do to be our best in front of an audience. I mean, you said you speak. It doesn't matter if you're in a room where you're talking to 20 people or 200 people. The preparation and where our attention goes and how we're thinking about the situation are all, like, we have to be present moment focused. All of that is the same. So nothing changes when we move from one situation where we say the consequences aren't quite as high to ones where the consequences are really high. At the end of the day, if we want to be our best, there's a way to approach that in any situation, regardless of consequences. And I don't know about you, but I try to go into situations always with trying to be at my best, regardless of what consequences are there or how important somebody's defined that situation. I know I want to go in at my best. So that's something, and that for me has been a source of comfort, in the sense that I think a lot of people experience stress or pressure when they do see a lot of volatility, a lot of difference between those, what they call smaller situations and bigger situations. Whereas if we just come to grips with the fact that, it doesn't matter small or big. For me, what I need to do is X, Y, Z. If I know that, that gives me a sense of control. That starts to eliminate some of that uncertainty. Because it doesn't matter how many people are there or what the thing is. I know that I can practice this, that. I know that my process is this, that. That puts me in a place where I can perform my best, no matter what it is. So that's what I'm going to do. And I think that provides a lot of comfort for people.
You are absolutely right, and it's probably one of the hardest things. I ran the gym for a while, and one of the hardest things to teach is in stress management is if you will just put in some prep work, if you'll make your lunch the night before, if you'll have your gym clothes packed, if you'll have gas in the car, if you'll know where your keys are, if you'll load in your work bag into your car, have it sitting by the door, if you'll have all these things, and when you go to bed, if you'll go to bed knowing the first three things you need to accomplish in the morning, you'll wake up with clarity and actionable items. Probably one of the hardest things to get people to adapt to.
Yeah, but it's incredibly important, because what it does is it removes those things that require resources in a situation that's already challenging.
Yep.
So when you wake up, I mean, unless you're in a rhythm, and those aren't the people we're talking about. We're talking about people who are trying to start creating a healthier habit. For those people, they wake up in the morning and it's hard to move in the direction of a gym. It requires a lot of resources. And so best thing to do is just start to lower the number of resources it requires. So it's not that you're doing different. It's not that you're not doing those things. You're still doing them. You're just doing them earlier. So everything that needs to get done is still being done. It's just not being done that morning while you're still struggling with, all right, really, is this what I'm going to do with my time? Because I could sleep longer, at least an hour. And that sounds good. So when you're dealing with all of that, the more resources you have to draw on to get yourself moving. It's inertia. Inertia is the body in motion tends to stay in motion. A body at rest tends to stay at rest unless acted on by an outside force. And that's the challenging part, is when we're trying to generate that internal motivation. Sometimes we have to be our own outside force, which sounds weird, but that inertia will continue unless we have something that redirects, something that gets us going in a different direction. This is another part of the tenacity discussion that I have and different workshops around motivation, burnout, is that source of motivation is really important in a couple ways. One, in just the context we're talking about now, if my source of motivation is truly coming from within me, it's a value that I hold, it's a really strong belief that is important to me, that's a source of motivation that will last. It will sustain me through challenging times, and it will be more likely to get me where I want to go than a source of motivation like, well, if I do this thing, then I get a milkshake later. Or if I do this thing, then I get to avoid getting yelled at or shamed by my spouse. Things like that.
Yeah.
And so those sources of motivation are really important. The other piece is that those other sources of motivation, the rewards, the punishments, the shame, the guilt, the ego, judgment, comparisons, those are all sources of motivation. But they leave us with a feeling of we're doing this thing, like we're being compelled to do this thing. I wouldn't do it if they weren't giving me this thing, but they're giving me the thing, so I'm going to go do it. I wouldn't do it if they weren't threatening to beat me, but they are. I wouldn't do it if I wasn't going to feel guilty about not doing it, but I will feel guilty, and so I'm going to go do it. So we feel like we have to. And in those moments too, that's where pressure tends to also build up. Why? Because we're thinking about those consequences. The consequences are the only reason we're engaging in what we're doing. I mean, that's the driving force. Whereas if what it is that the driving force is coming more from within, I'm doing this because I'm a healthy person. I'm doing this because of love for my family. I'm doing this because I want to engage more fully with life. And I understand the ephemeral, short, but so important nature of life. And I want to engage, whatever it is, like something like that keeps you going. That's something that at no point is going to be like a consequence that will distract us from where our attention should be and create any pressure. Whereas if those rewards and punishments are what's driving us, way more likely to experience the pressure.
Yeah, it's another angle that sometimes is where it just depends on what angle you approach it from, right? And it's trying to reframe that for everyone is always, especially when you're raised in that negative mindset, or you're around that negative influence or that negative approach to, like you said, is we can always be like, well, I'm being forced to sit here and have this conversation with Brian, or freak, man, I get to meet this guy that has this interesting life. Tell me this, where did all of this come from? Where was this born out of? Was it born out of a situation, or you're like, you saw an area? Can you walk us through kind of where your passion and facts and your teaching concepts come from?
Yeah, I'll tell you briefly about that. I mean, it's there's a lot, but I'll run through a little quick part of that. But I want to address what you said. One of the things that my daughter knows, this is one of those things where my daughter, she's 11, she's about to be 12, and it's if you were to ask her, she'd say it drives her crazy. But I also know that if she has kids, she's going to do the same thing. Is when she says she has to do something, I just say get to.
Yeah.
And I said just change it. I have to do this math. No, you get to do this math assignment. Do you know how many other kids around this globe would kill to be able to have the opportunity to learn something that you're learning, to experience what you're about to experience. Yeah, you get to. And so every time I hear have to out of the kid, I'm like, you get to. I get to. And so I know that if you were to ask them, they don't like it, but I think that it's going to stick, and they're going to do it with
It
their kids too.
does.
But
I do
it's
the same
true, and it's
thing.
not
It
even
does. It does. All of them do
it's
with it. You
well,
they'll be kicking the can tonight when we're pushing that sled while we're working on base running, and they're going to be all ticked off at me. They'll be like, "Boys, we get to do this. We get to do," and the same thing. And then by the time they're done, they're happy, right?
mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is, it's not crap. Again, it's not trying to create, uh, stallions out of camels. It
Yeah.
really is something it's real. It's just about our perspective. This is why too, I in the talks that I give, I conceptualize stress and pressure in terms of an illusion. I think both are illusions, and not illusions in the sense that they're not there or they're not real. Because when we experience stress, when we experience pressure, it's there and it's very real and very powerful. I conceptualize it as an illusion in the same way that, well, there's a popular illusion that pretty much everybody's familiar with, is this picture that if you look at it one way, it's an old lady with a big nose and a shawl over her head. And if you look at it a different way, it's a young lady with big hair and a necklace around her neck. But the data don't change. The picture's not switching. The lines aren't moving. It's just what it is. But if we look at it one way, we experience an old person. If we look at it a different way, we experience a young person. Both are legitimate experiences. Both are legitimate perspectives. And both are equally possible in the situation provided. Well, pressure is the same way. Stress is the same way. Like I said at the beginning, it's not the situation. The situation just is what it is. It's the picture. How we choose to look at the situation will determine whether we experience pressure or we don't, whether we experience stress or whether we experience excitement. And so it's an illusion in that way. It's an illusion in that whatever environment we're in can be seen in multiple ways. And if we're experiencing stress, that's just a way to perceive it. And we can get rid of that stress just as quickly by perceiving the situation differently.
Yeah, that's you absolutely right there. That's your approach will absolutely it'll make the water taste different. It'll make the food, so all those things is just approaching. I've had to do this. I had this conversation with people before when it comes to texting. I've had people be like, "Oh, I can't believe I got this text." I'm like, "Read it to me." And they're like, "Damn, this is what he said." And I go, "Now read it to me while you're smiling." And they're like, and they'll pause and they'll get to. Now I'm serious. Read it to me with a big grin and tell me if it feels different. And they're like, "Well, kinda," right? And I'm like, I'll teach that with business owners when I got an email and I'm like, well, hang on here. Don't read that email. Read it with a smile, or read it in a happy space. Because if you read it, we can always be mad when you look at that. That's
Yeah.
good, Brian, man.
Yeah. Well,
Where'd all this come from, dude?
so that came from, I don't know. It certainly wasn't some big epiphany. This is the moment kind of a
Yeah.
thing. Especially even this idea of pressure, that's just been emerging over the last year or so. I don't know where I was or who I was talking to, but somebody said something about pressure situations or performing well under pressure. And for whatever reason, I mean, I've been hearing that for years, but for whatever reason, it struck me at that point. And I got to thinking, I don't think that's right. I don't think that's how it is. And luckily, I am a stuntman. And so I was able to put it into practice as I've been thinking about these things and writing about them and I don't know, just coming to grips with some of this stuff for myself. I was able to go on set and put it into practice, just try it out. Like, wait a minute. All right. So what am I feeling right now? Is this stress? And if so, why? And if there's pressure, where's the pressure? Where's my attention? And just because I'm used to putting my mind and emotions and control, like that's something I've been doing for a long time. I intentionally created pressure by putting my attention on consequences so that I could just see, all right, well, is this the case? If I put my attention here and I really that's there. That's the pressure I'm feeling. Let's get out of that pretty quick. I don't like that.
Yeah.
But I was able to just test it out and really just take it on a road trip and see how it worked. and it worked very well. And again, this all just, I was a stuntman for a very long time. I went to grad school. I dropped out of college the first time, but eventually I ended up going back and finished the master's in sports psychology and PhD in organizational psychology. Not because I ever expected to work in those fields. I was going to be a stuntman forever, but because I just enjoyed the material and the applicability of the material. I was immediately able to put that stuff into practice in stunts. And then those experiences led to the decade I spent working with the Army, the way I was telling you before. And then all of that has culminated once I've started my business it's like I said, it's been about a year since this aspect of the business has been going on. But all of that's come together in a way that those experiences with stunts and all the theories and academic stuff around performance and stress, pressure and motivation,
Love it, man.
and the decade with the military, all of these things are able to come together in a way that allows me to approach performance, particularly high stakes performance, in a unique way and with different stories and different experiences to hopefully make the points clearer than a lot of people do. And I've really enjoyed it. The talks that I've been able to give, the workshops that I've offered, the people I've gotten to meet along the way, it's really been a lot of fun. So
it's got to be
part of it. So I appreciate you having me on to talk about it.
No, because I'm a little kid here, man. I love same thing. Coming when I went into practice, I remember the lady at the front desk melting down because her keyboard didn't work one day, and I was like, "Hang on here, what's wrong?" And she's like, "My keyboard, the phones are ringing." I'm like, "Oh, hang on here," and I was like, "Here." Here's some. I put the thing. I plugged it in. Right. I'm like, "Hey, it just was unplugged," and it came back to life. And she was like, "How do you do this under, with all this phones are ringing off the hook? There's people standing out here. How do you manage this?" And I go, Nobody's shooting at me. But I learned that that was her moment. Like that's her, someone was shooting at her. That's her jumping out of onto that 10 foot, doing that 10 foot no pads drop. That was her stressful moment. So it really got me intrigued on learning.
That was her moment.
Yes.
It didn't have to be stressful.
Yeah.
Again, and I think that's so important because even when people were shooting at you, even when I'm about to get hit by a car, thrown downstairs, or crash a motorcycle or whatever it is, that's just a situation. It's just what's happening. And if I want to be at my best, meaning, in those situations we just described, I want to go home in the same condition I showed up in.
Yeah.
Well, there's a way to do that. And it doesn't involve experiencing stress or pressure. Those will just inhibit my ability. That will reduce my chances of going home in the condition I want to. So again, I think if anybody listening to this doesn't take anything else away, just take this. It's not the situation there. And anytime we've said, well, they did this, so I felt, so I was mad, or of course I was upset. They did this. It's not there. There's no, of course, it didn't have to be. And there are many situations where people wouldn't feel that way. Maybe think about those. Maybe you've even experienced those. Maybe you've even experienced the exact same situation, but a little bit differently with a different person, and you felt differently. There's no guarantee that whatever circumstance we find ourselves in will create stress or pressure. And we can be sure that if those situations we want to perform our best, if we are experiencing stress and pressure, we are not going to be performing as well as we could be. And we certainly aren't going to be as happy as we could be while doing whatever it is that we're doing.
Yeah. Tell us so everyone's clear, but real quick, I have a 12, almost 13-year-old daughter, heavily into sports. We have these minds. She's in a hitting slump right now. We have these mindset, all the talks. But I wanted to tell you that, so I'm right where you are, dad wise, with my daughter, pretty close in age. So I'm with you on little similar conversations that I get to have with her from just my points of positivity as well. But tell everyone what you do now, how you deploy all this stuff to help others, and whatever that looks like, and then what it looks like, who your ideal client is, and who you like to work with.
Yeah, well, what I do now is a lot of things. I still do stunts. I'm working with a literary agent now to create a book and get that published. Another book. I have one book now called Begin Again: Utilize the Wisdom of Eastern and Western Ideologies to Achieve Your Full Potential. It's a book very similar to the Daily Stoic, if anybody's familiar with that. Just a lot of short essays that are easy to read. But anyway, I'm doing that. And then with this business, I work with a lot of people. That the five populations that I've really chosen to focus on are first responders, educators, corporate environments, meaning some CEOs. I've also worked with middle management and just done workshops throughout organizations. I also work with athletes, coaches in athletics, and performing artists. So I've worked with actors, singers. I don't think I've had any. No, one dancer, had a musician, opera singer. So it's the performing artist world too. So those are the types of populations, and really
Awesome.
the glue, the umbrella under which all of the things go is that high stakes performance environment. But even outside of that, even if you're not one of those people, and just you still work in situations and you live and you experience situations that really matter to you. And in those moments, everything that I'm talking about, it doesn't, if you're in the Super Bowl or you're trying to cook Thanksgiving dinner for your family, the things that will keep you focused and able to perform whatever you're trying to do the best you can, those don't change. It's all the same. So the focus, our arousal levels, confidence, the tenacity, all of those things have to be in place. And if they are, it doesn't matter what we're talking about or what the consequences are, we're going to put ourselves in the best position possible to succeed, whatever success looks like and whatever the outcome of that success is.
I echo, even coming out of all those backgrounds and kind of enjoy the little bit of self-induced stress that I'm able to live in now and being able to manage it better. But I think the things that I read about you and what I was like when I see high performance that's a big deal. Is I enjoy that, I call it the tip of the spear, and that high, the folks that don't have very high standards, and we work in those high stress environments. Um, and what I've learned with that is there's just Sally over here who may be in the copy world. Like she sells high end copies or whatever. There's an appreciation for everything that I just said because she wants to live her life in a high performing, and she wants high standards, and she wants all those things. So just like what you said, I want to make sure I point that out. This is that five buckets what Brian spoke to. But if that's what you're looking for and you want to reach that and strive for that peak performance, this is definitely connecting with Brian is definitely
Yeah. And
something
if
that
you'd like to, the website's the best way to do it. It's brianhiteglobal.com, BRIANHITE global.com. And there are group classes on there, group coaching sessions that are available. I do a little bit of individual coaching, but I'm pretty selective with that these days. I do more of the group coaching, the
yeah.
workshops, and keynotes. So if anything that I've talked about here sounds like something that you or whatever organization you're a part of might be interested in, I love doing those too. In fact, that's one of my favorite things in the world, to get on stage and just share some of this information and some of the stories and hear some stories from the people in those audiences. It's so fun.
We didn't get to any of your cool roles. We didn't get to talk about any of your Fall Guy moments or broken bones and all that stuff. So um, um, hopefully this is our first meeting and we can come back together at some point in time and you can just fill us full of tons of more value and we can learn a little more about what it's like to be a stuntman in today's climate. But
Yeah, well,
dude,
these are always fun. So if you enjoyed it, you want to have me back, I'd love to come back. I've enjoyed the discussion too.
absolutely,
So
dude.
just shoot me an email or something. Let's stay in touch, and happy to do it again.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being here, folks. Make sure you take advantage and let's look at. I'm gonna make sure your website is backlinked to it, like we always do. I do a little blog post for us, but make sure you connect with Brian. And I'm gonna take his advice, and I'm gonna go to his website and hopefully jump into one of his group classes just to keep this vibe going because it's definitely something that you got to work at every day if you want to be if you're committed to being the best in life. You got to find folks like Brian who are willing to help you reach that peak performance and get the most that you can out of your life. But thank you, Brian, for being with us today.
Thank you.